This is Bradley Manning, filmed at the opening of a Boston University Computer Society. He smiles, almost flirts at the camera. 4 months later, in May, Manning is a nervous wreck, chatting online to a famous hacker called Adrian Lamo. Online conversations which lead to his arrest, accused of the biggest intelligence leak in US military history.
Hi, how are you? I'm an Army intelligence analyst deployed to eastern Baghdad, pending discharge for adjustment disorder. I'm sure you're pretty busy. If you had unprecedented access to classified networks 14 hours a day, 7 days a week for 8+ months, what would you do?
When he was a hacker, he had no home. Now he does, but he lives in secret and says his life is under threat. Adrian Lamo was once convicted of hacking into computers at the New York Times. But now he's best known as the man who told U.S. authorities about Bradley Manning.
I had to act for the good of the many. I took no joy in it. It wasn't the right choice. It wasn't the wrong choice. There was no right or wrong choice.
Soldier Bradley Manning is currently imprisoned at a U.S. military jail as he awaits for his eventual trial. He's accused of leaking tens of thousands of classified diplomatic and military secrets to WikiLeaks. His lawyer says he is subjected to cruel and degrading treatment.
I regret that he came to me after he had let himself be, to an extent, led on by Julian Assange. That he did not come to me at a point where I could talk him out of it.
You did what he did before as well as a hacker. I mean, and you believed of getting information in this way, not through Freedom of Information Act procedures. A lot of people are saying that you basically, changed completely, or you were working for the government.
I know that basically for some people the position is that I more or less defected.
He's 23 now, and he's spent most of the last year in solitary confinement, drugged with antidepressants. He's facing 52 years in jail. But how did Bradley Manning ever make it to Iraq, when the officers training him had warned the army repeatedly that he was mentally unstable and recommended that he be discharged?
Low-flying planes could have seen that kid wasn't suitable. I do not understand the justification or what excuses they had to keep him around. I mean, he was a wreck. He was a complete wreck. And this is for a boy who's pissing his pants and curled up in a fetal position on his bunk and constantly, screaming.
So who is Bradley Manning? And if he was mentally unstable, why was he allowed to get to the very heart of the US military intelligence network?
I want people to see the truth, regardless of who they are, because without information, you cannot make informed decisions as a public.
When I first saw Brad, he was at a school dance, dancing with his then boyfriend. I had not met either of them in person, but I knew who they were from the internet. And they were in the middle of the dance floor, just right in front of everyone, not off to the side or anything. They were dancing extremely close. It was, I wouldn't say ostentatious, but it was kind of exaggerated dancing and very, very hot.
The man Bradley was dancing with was Tyler Watkins, a student at Brandeis University in Boston.
Tyler was kind of like the anchor for Brad. Brad was constantly being moved from fort to fort, base to base, and he didn't have the best relationship with his immediate family and his extended family. Tyler was the one constant for that year they were together.
I don't believe in good guys versus bad guys anymore. Only a plethora of states acting in self-interest. With varying ethics and moral standards, of course, but self-interest nonetheless.
Light them all up. 202 traffic, 260.
Come on, fire!
This video, known as Collateral Murder, will always be linked to Bradley Manning's name. It was released by the WikiLeaks website. It shows two American helicopter pilots admiring their work after they opened fire on suspected insurgents.
Oh yeah, look at those dead bastards. Nice. 2-6, Crazy Horse 1-8.
This is where Bradley Manning grew up. The town was stunned that the person accused of leaking military secrets to the world was one of their own. Bradley Manning had grown up around these cornfields.
He was very, very bright, very, very intelligent. Since all this has begun, we've kind of looked up some of the old records and stuff. In his 7th grade year, I believe he was a straight A student. Crescent is a rural community. We have approximately 2,000 people here. I'm not saying that we do not have gay people here in our community. Probably today would have been more accepted, but I would think back then would have had some consequences to it.
It seemed like he feared his father, like, you know, like, not in the same way that, like, I feared my dad. More fear than what I would call healthy. He loved his mom, for sure. He was always really into politics. He was always, you know, on September 11th, we were, you know, both he and I were just like, you know, we were really freaking out. He was very, very worried about the country's future. And that's because he loved America.
I swear by the lake on the mountain, I swear by blood that's red.
Manning moved to Wales in 2002 following his parents' divorce. His mother is Welsh. These days they're having fundraising fetes in support of the boy from Haverfordwest.
Until oppression is ended, and I will never rest until oppression is dead.
His school friends from those days remember him as a bit of a super geek, the king of the computer club.
I think what got Bradley so into computers was the fact that he was always around them from a young age. I remember him telling me that he learned computers because his old man had a computer when he was a kid, and he used to always spend his time on the computer then.
What he aimed for was to be some form of IT superpower, similar to that of like the Microsoft kind of like brand. I think he wanted to be renowned for his IT skills.
I can't remember him saying that he was specifically going to leave, so it was quite sudden. I remember finding out one day that he had gone. I can't recall a time when he said he was leaving. I think just one day he was there, and then the other day he'd gone back to America for whatever reason.
Our efforts are aimed at a clear goal: a free Iraq that can protect its people, support itself economically, and take charge of its own political affairs.
By the time he returned, America was immersed in 2 deadly wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. Bradley Manning was 17. He wandered the country looking for a job in IT and a life. The jobs came and went, so he slept in his red pickup truck and wondered what was next. He desperately wanted to go to university, but joining the army and getting a military scholarship was the only way to pay for it. It would be a terrible price.
I mean, the kid was barely 5 foot, 5'1", 5 foot 2. He was a runt. And by military standards, by everybody that was around there, he was a runt. So pick on him. He's crazy. Pick on him. He's a faggot. Pick on him. The guy took it from every side. He couldn't please anyone.
This man, now based in Memphis, asked that we hide his identity. He trained side by side with Bradley Manning in Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. He tells a shocking story of what happened to him there.
He was targeted by bullies. He was targeted by the drill sergeants. Basically he was targeted by anybody who was within arm's reach of him. There were 3 guys that had him up front and cornered, and they were picking on him, and he was yelling and screaming back, and I'm yelling at the guys, get the hell out of here, back off and everything, and started pulling Manning off. Now, the other guys were taking care of the ones that were picking on him and stuff, and I got Manning off to the side there, and yeah, he pissed himself. That wasn't the only time he did that, but I mean, that was the time I remember.
The officers training him had come to the conclusion that he was mentally unstable and recommended that he be discharged immediately.
One of my friends that was still at the discharge unit called me from a cell, and he said, he's giving me the updates, telling me what was going on. And then he said, oh, and by the way, Bradley's getting recycled. And I was in shock. I couldn't believe it. There's no way that this guy was getting recycled.
But someone up the line changed their mind. Manning was to be recycled from discharge back into the army. Recycling is army slang for giving him another go. There was a shortage of computer intelligence analysts in Baghdad. They needed Manning in Iraq, whatever state he was in.
In 2007, recruitment numbers were at the lowest they'd ever been. They were lowering recruitment standards like crazy. I mean, facial tattoos, too tall, too short, too fat, criminal records, didn't matter. I mean, they even upped the age limit. You could be 42 years old and still enlist for basic training. So it was take everybody you can get, keep a hold of everybody you can get.
So they pushed him through the system to the next base near Boston. These were happier times, and 2008 and 2009 were something of an epiphany for Manning. Boston was a place where he felt free to be himself, intellectually and sexually. He was happy with Tyler, the man he loved. He attended gay rights demonstrations. But Boston also held other attractions for Bradley Manning. This was where he was able to make contact with students at the prestigious MIT and Boston universities, the computer elite of America.
It's a very youthful culture. It's a culture of vitality that is centered around the notion or the idea of self-empowerment.
David House is a founder of Boston University's Hackerspace and New Manning.
Some people call it this hacker culture in Boston. Name's actually a little bit misleading. What it really is, it's a very profound culture that is predicated on self-empowerment through technology with the goal of achieving some good social end.
They were stored on a centralized server. It was vulnerable as fuck. Well, it was forwarded to WL, and God knows what happens now. Hopefully, worldwide discussion, debates, and reforms. If not, then we're doomed. As a species, I will officially give up on the society we have if nothing happens.
Things may have been going well in Boston, but back on base, his commanding officers were again raising the alarm about sending him to Iraq. One said, "I felt he was a risk to himself and others." He was showing signs of instability, said another. But they were ignored, and Bradley Manning went to Iraq. He was sent to Forward Operating Base Hammer, 35 kilometers east of Baghdad.
It was in the middle of a desert. There was sand everywhere. We had dust storms, probably quite often, I don't know, once a month or so, as far as while I was there. It was not fun. It was nothing to do there, totally bored, and a bleak place. Everything was brown over there.
There was a fog. There was like a fog that would come in almost every morning that was pollution from nearby that just smelled sour and nasty and would wave through and linger and just, I don't know, it'd create an eerie atmosphere.
The morale, I think, generally was really low for everyone that was there that I talked to. All the soldiers pretty much didn't like it. Nobody had a purpose out there, so I think that affected a lot of people.
Despite the mental health warnings and the boredom, Manning did well for those first 2 months at Fob Hammer. It's not clear what happened, but in December, his superiors took the bolt out of his gun. He was considered unfit to be carrying a functioning weapon. But there was still light at the end of the tunnel for Bradley Manning. He was going back to Boston at the end of the month, to freedom and to Tyler Watkins. But it was not the homecoming he was expecting.
It was kind of like an emailed Dear John letter. It ended seemingly abruptly, but Brad didn't really know that. I don't know if he just wasn't accepting it or if he just hadn't fully understood that his relationship was over. He wanted to feel like, a hero, like you hear in the stories. He just came back from a war. He is an intelligence analyst. He had an important job to do. and he was doing it well. He had gotten a promotion, and when he came back instead, he was met with a boyfriend who didn't want him and basically no friends at all.
The Boston gay scene was no longer a source of protection or comfort for Manning.
I walked into the Brandeis student group for gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender students, and Tyler was in the middle of the room organizing the whole thing. He was one of the club officers. Brad was just sitting in the corner by himself. He knew no one in the room except for Tyler, who was completely ignoring him.
Facing rejection and finding himself pushed away, he turned increasingly to his computer friends. Within days of his breakup, he turns up here at the launch party of Boston University's free hackerspace.
We had about 150 people that showed up to builds, and they were all just beautiful people, really, really advanced human beings.
This scene caught inadvertently on camera is the only footage of Bradley Manning.
He seemed highly intelligent. That much was very obvious. He has this kind of presence about him that you understand really quickly. He's very highly intelligent.
But a few days after the party, it's back to Iraq, where morale and security in the intelligence section where he's working is deteriorating.
The laptop's sitting there with passwords. Everybody writes, like I said, you write their password down on a sticky note and set it by the computer. It wasn't a lot of security going on. It was no wonder something like this transpired.
Funny thing is, we transferred so much data on unmarked CDs. Everyone did. Videos, movies, music, all out in the open. Bringing CDs to and from the networks was and is a common phenomenon.
Is that how you got the cables out?
Perhaps. I would come in with music on a rewritable CD, labeled with something like Lady Gaga, erase the music, then write a compressed split file. No one suspected a thing. Kind of sad.
And odds are they never will.
I didn't even have to hide anything.
If someone came into, let's say, the office I was in, the headquarter area I was in when I was on duty watching things, and they jumped on a computer, and I didn't necessarily know them, but they're in uniform and all that good stuff, and they're on a computer, I'm not going to say, hey, whoa, excuse me, what are you doing, sir? You can't do that. I'm just going to be like, whatever.
Meanwhile, Manning is on a downward spiral. The explosive rages are continuing, but he's still allowed to remain at his post as a security intelligence analyst.
Everyone just sat at their workstations, watching music videos, car chases, buildings exploding, and writing more stuff to CDs and DVDs. The culture fed opportunities.
This stuff was all in like a folder. It was like, it had like a generic name or whatever, so nobody would look into it, but it was all just set there for entertainment. That was pretty much the point of the folder, was entertainment, and it had a mix of games, sex, and violence. They love to watch these clips of Apaches gunning down people and whatnot. This is definitely entertainment.
On May the 7th, Bradley Manning punches a female officer in the face. He's disciplined and immediately demoted. He's told he is finally to be discharged from the army. He's lost his job, his boyfriend, and any chance of a university education. For comfort, he turns back to his computer friends, even those that don't really know him, like the famous hacker Adrian Lamo, who, in less than 24 hours after this online chat, will inform US intelligence of those conversations.
I'm not sure whether I'd be considered a type of hacker, cracker, hacktivist, leaker, or what. I'm just me, really.
Or a spy.
I couldn't be a spy. Spies don't post things up for the world to see.
Lamo and Manning met over the internet more than a year ago. The two chatted online. Lamo says he considered Manning a friend.
People don't understand what it was like to have to make the decision, to have to be in my shoes, and to ultimately have to be responsible for putting a young man in shackles at the same age that I was.
What did you get in return for turning in Private Bradley Manning?
A couple cups of coffee, pat on the back.
Bradley Manning will be court-martialed in December 2011. If convicted, he faces 52 years in prison.